So hello everyone, I am Amalia Natalio of KarmicKindness, and joining me is Lisa Reinhardt of Way of Chocolate. And just a little backstory on how I met Lisa, and it's actually kind of funny. So right after COVID, when things were sort of opening up, I was out here in Phoenix, Arizona, visiting my mom and my sister and her family and brother, and I thought, geez, I'm in Phoenix, let me go and check out the Civic Center. And Lisa you're kind of my point of contact at that point, where you were so sweet and gracious and were like, yes, come on. And I came in and we chatted, and Katie came, and you and I sat down and had tea, and we had this most delightful, delicious conversation. And that's when I found out at that point about Way of Chocolate. I didn't really know. And at that time they were like little flowers that were wrapped in this aluminum, and they were so cute. And you were like, well, if you think those are cute, I'm getting ready to rebrand the whole thing. And so here's some samples of some of Lisa's chocolates. And I mean, these are stunning. There's so much thoughtfulness that went into the packaging. There's little information about what's in it, like here, the black sesame dark chocolate, ground your inner earth. So you already know what element it connects to, and I believe that was a big part of it for you. And there's several different elements. Even the chocolates, on the chocolates, there are symbols, which we're going to get to later, because I'd love to hear more about that. But I would love for you to share your inspiration for creating Way of Chocolate.
Yeah, it was totally unexpected, actually. I mean, it's not like I had a background in confectionery things or food or even, but it came out of me living in Asia for 11 years.
Okay.
And I went over there to study meditation. I was so lucky to be there at the time that I was there. It was when all of the great meditation masters from Tibet, who had been forced out by the communist invasion of Tibet, were living in Nepal and India. And these are people who've been meditating for decades, and really the greatest meditation masters of the 20th century at that point. This was late 80s, and all through the 90s I was there. And I was able to study with these people, practice with them, do a lot of retreat on my own. And I loved it. I just loved that whole world and everything what's happening. But at a certain point, I felt being pushed back to the United States. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because at that point I really hadn't anticipated coming back. But I thought, no point fighting it. And I came back. I thought, great, I'm here to share something about meditation.
Yeah.
Because the people that I talked to, everybody was looking for those benefits. Everybody wants more peace and more compassion and more insight. And I thought, great, this is awesome. So I bring up meditation, and this was way before meditation was cool. And people would look in their eyes and they'd be like, oh, that thing with the breath. I tried that once. I'm not good at it. I don't have time.
All the excuses, all the
yeah. And my heart would sink, because I think, my goodness, this is what people need. That's what they want, but they just don't know the path there. And so finally, I realized something that probably most everybody else already knew, which is chocolate is the answer.
Yes.
And if you take a really good piece of chocolate and you let it melt in your mouth and you don't chew it, it'll take about 2 to 3 minutes. And in that time, there's nowhere other than the present moment that you're going to be, right? So you're doing everything that you'd want to be doing if you were learning meditation, except you'll be doing it better, because it's so compelling and it's so instantly rewarding, to be with it in the present moment. So I thought, okay, I can do this, except I didn't want to do something that would be bad for people,
right.
Like tell them to eat chocolate every day. I mean, when I grew up, nobody was talking about chocolate being good for you. But it was right around that time when the studies started coming out, and I thought, wow, let's look into this. So I started collecting all the studies and, connecting the dots. And I made all the decisions about the chocolate based on what would be not only not detrimental, but actually positive for people to eat every day. So it's organic, fair trade, dairy-free, gluten-free, soy-free, no GMOs, paleo-friendly. It's low glycemic. It's sweetened with organic coconut sugar, which doesn't make a spike in the blood sugar.
And it's delicious, by the way. Like, seriously, some of the best chocolate I've ever had.
We do a lot of R&D here.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of volunteers who are willing.
Feel free to send it to Florida. Happy to volunteer.
And we don't stop till we get a wow. We were doing this recently, trying some new flavors. And
I believe you have one of them here. Isn't the Divine Rose?
That is one of the newer flavors, definitely.
Yeah.
But I mean ones that haven't even been released yet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We're looking at something for the dragon year. This is the wood dragon year.
Yeah.
And so keep your eyes open. We might have something special for that. And then some other ones that are pretty amazing.
Oh, surprises to come.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So obviously, you and one of your besties, Katie, who is the founder of Lotuswei, that's where people can find your chocolates.
Right, because in the beginning, Katie started Lotuswei and I started Wei of Chocolate. And we grew up the company side by side. And then, 16, 17 years later, we finally merged. Last year, 2023, we merged the two.
So exciting. I know when I heard that news, I was just like, oh, that's so cool that you guys are officially, because I feel like you were already kind of
we
doing
always
it.
did everything together, but you know how it is. Like everybody wants to run their own thing and everybody's got their own ways, and that's awesome. And we did that for a long time. And then Katie said, I really need more help over here. And I'm like, it's hard to do two things. So why don't we just make it one thing? I was like, okay. And it was easy at that point.
Well, and the other thing too, so with the chocolate, it's really wholesome. It's got all of the beauty of dark chocolate without the negative benefit.
Right.
Well, that would make sense. Without the negative side effect.
Right.
And all the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also some other amazingness, and this is not just ordinary dark chocolate either.
No, that's true. I mean, from the beginning, not actually from the beginning, because at first it was all about the herbs and spices, the therapeutic herbs that were in it.
Okay.
But at a certain point, Katie said to me, and she said, why don't you try putting flower essences in the chocolate? And I said, that'll never work. How would that work? And she said, let's just try it. And so I did try it, and it did work. And then I thought, why is this working? And I looked into it, and it's because chocolate is a crystalline structure. So when you temper chocolate, there's a difference between chocolate that's not tempered and chocolate that's tempered.
Okay.
Or best example is if you leave it in your car and it melts and then it reforms, it gets harder at some point, it's not the same, right?
Oh.
So that's showing you the chocolate is tempered. And when you temper chocolate, you actually instruct it what kind of crystalline structure to create. Because there's several different kinds, and the kind that it reforms after it melts in the car is not the kind you want. It's dull, it's kind of crumbly, it doesn't have the snap or the gloss or the, form that it does when it's good. And so that crystalline structure holds the vibrational information from the flower remedies. And so that's perfect. Like who could have, guessed that could be?
I never knew that. I kind of, when you were describing that, I visualized in my mind this beautiful chocolate box that's holding a flower in it. As you were describing this crystalline structure that holds that so beautifully. Yeah. And then when you meditate with that square on your tongue, it's like this gift box that opens up for you. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that the next time I meditate with the chocolate. That's really fun. Yeah. That's really fun. So what else about the chocolate makes it unique other than the flower essences? Because I feel like there's also, with some of them, the crystal.
Well, there's also the things that we put on site. Do you think it would be bad if we opened one up?
I don't think so. No objections here. I would love the Divine Love. I haven't tried that one.
Okay. So this one, Divine Rose Dark Chocolate. It has in it the flower essences from Divine Within. And so Divine Within is a formula that Katie came up with to address all of the reasons why we actually know how to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. The question is, why don't we?
That's a good question.
It's like, we do know. So all of those little tendrils of reasons why, like it could be, we could be a perfectionist and we're not perfect yet, so we don't take care of ourselves because we're not perfect yet. Like unconscious reasons.
Right? I think many women could relate to that one specifically. Yeah, myself included.
There's so many of those. So all of those flower essences are in this chocolate, so that it will address all of those reasons. And then on the chocolate bar itself, we made a custom mold. And so cool. I don't know if you can see it from here, but there's 9 squares and 5 of them are the elements. So we have earth, water, fire, wind, and space.
So just so if, for those of you watching, Lisa was basically touching the corners. The corners.
Fire, water, earth, water, fire, wind, and space.
Yeah. So that I feel like is really helpful, because when you are, I mean, there's so many ways you can do it. Like, you really can't make a mistake. But if you're feeling, like for me, sometimes if I'm feeling really emotional, going with the earth, it gives me more of a grounded feeling where I'm not getting lost. Or if I'm like very mental,
right?
It's just, it's all about intention. It's the energy that you're putting into whatever you're doing. And so anyway, I want you to share more about.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Because then, you look at the different qualities of the 5 elements. So like you say, earth is grounding, it's stabilizing. It's that unconditional support that all of us would appreciate.
Yes.
All we have to do is remember, because it's always there.
Yes.
Right? And then water has flexibility to it. Like if we get too stubborn or too stuck in our ways, then we can tap into the flexibility of water, or the cleansing quality of water.
Yeah.
Fire is creative energy. It burns away all of the distractions. So that's a really powerful element. Wind is interesting because you see it in the trees, right? So we always think of it as green energy, it's like, and it's vitality.
Yeah.
And then space is the funniest element, because we never think about space.
Right.
But yet, space allows everything to exist. There is no world without space.
And there's more space than anything else.
It's the biggest thing in the room, right?
Yeah.
And we never think about it.
Yeah.
So I teach some meditation classes here now twice a week, and live stream them once a week, and we always tap into the 5 elements and
love that.
Remind ourselves of space, because there's so much potential for liberation.
Yeah, I mean, I am. It's on my agenda of things to do, my to-do list to attend one of the meditations. But I will say, without even having attended it, just having conversations with you, Lisa, the wisdom and the experience of your life that you're sharing with people in a way that only you can, I would imagine would be really transformational in that hour and a half, that you're holding space and sharing in that way. So
it's really fun. It's like it's when you think about meditate for an hour, we're not meditating like not like that.
Yeah, so don't get scared off anyone. So what about the other symbols?
Okay, so then the other symbols, we've also got one here. This is the symbol for enlightened body.
Oh.
So this is Om.
Okay.
There's 2 the same here, which are Ah, enlightened speech, and Hum, which is enlightened mind. Isn't that interesting?
Mind.
Isn't that interesting that in the East, this is body and this is mind?
That is interesting. Wow. So that's great, because I did not know what those the top what those were. Yes. But I'm so articulately pointing out. Yeah, so that's amazing, because that actually will change how, I'm very logically oriented. I'm very left-brained, and I'm exercising and growing my right brain, and that more of that felt sense and just following the flow and intuitive knowing. But I can't really turn off the logic part. So when I'm feeling into this, for me, it's like I'd like to understand the connection between what's there, the flower essences that are in the chocolate, and the symbology as I choose which square to put in my mouth. And there was a time period where I think I said this on a call a while back, like I was literally addicted. I could not stop. It was just one of those things that, I don't know, it just made me feel more in tune with myself. I love dark chocolate. And my husband actually is not a big dark chocolate person, but he really does like these. So there is something different, something special.
It's interesting, because people will say, oh, there's something about that. Because you could almost say, well, if I didn't tell you it was there, you wouldn't know the flower essences are there. But it depends, because some people say, wow, there's something different about this, and they don't know why. And they say, it's like, it's a lie.
Absolutely.
And when I sometimes eat other kinds of chocolate, it does happen occasionally. I notice that. It's like there's a flatness there. Like it's missing that sparkle quality.
Yeah, there is, because of, I feel like too, it's the intention, your the catalyst, the drive that you had to create this, that seeding, that starting point is then permeating into everything else that comes from that. So there is a difference, whatever your inspiration is to do anything, how you're moving forward on that. I'm curious what your experience was living in Nepal, and I believe you were in the Himalayas, and you spent like a pretty significant period of time in very deep meditation. And how was that experience for you in that moment, and what did you carry from that into coming back here and then ultimately creating Way of Chocolate?
Yeah, those are good questions. Yeah, I was really lucky to have the opportunity to do retreat. And I did some in Nepal of various kinds. And then I went to India at one point, to northern India, to a place where there's a whole community of people living in caves. And I did retreat in a cave in northern India. And that was probably the favorite time of my whole, 11 years in Asia was that time.
How long were you in the cave?
It wasn't that long. I actually bought supplies to be there for 6 months. I was going to do a 6 months retreat.
Gosh.
And about a month or so in, a very great Lama arrived from Tibet. And he had escaped from Tibet to come to that place.
Wow.
And I was in my cave doing retreat, and somebody knocked on my little cave door.
You have a door in the cave?
Yeah, I got a cave in the, it's almost like Hobbit. It's almost like Hobbit houses up there.
Okay, that doesn't sound so bad.
Not so bad. I had one light bulb. So it was, there was a little bit of, protection and comfort in that.
What about, I want to hear about the llama that came, but what about, how did you eat?
So I had bought 6 months of supplies.
Okay. And so canned goods and...
no, just really? Dry goods. I mean,
dry goods, okay.
And I had a pressure cooker. I had one pot, I had a pressure cooker, and I had a little kerosene stove. And so I would pump up my little kerosene stove and cook, throw everything in the pressure cooker and eat that every day. And then there were some village people who would deliver vegetables maybe once a week or something. There was a vegetable delivery and a milk delivery, it was beautiful because it was so fresh and so, wow. Yeah.
It had all of the goodness of milk.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a big milk person, but I can imagine having that would be
unpasteurized, like fresh, like from a real cow that people.
Yeah.
So there was stuff like that.
Okay.
And I lived in. There was a monk and a nun who were brother and sister, and I rented their storage cave, so they had cleaned up the storage cave. And so I was in this little enclave with these beautiful people. And so somebody came and knocked on my door and said, "This great Lama, it's down at the monastery cave, there's a bigger gathering cave, and he's doing something special." And I said, "I'm busy, I'm here doing retreat, I'm busy." And they're like, "No, really, you really ought to come." And I'm like, "Okay."
You reluctantly left your cave.
Yeah, I went down, and I was amazed because all the townspeople had come up to the cave, and the place was overflowing with people, and I had never seen more than a handful of people ever up there.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And so I sat down, and at that point I didn't know Tibetan language, so I was just listening with my ears wide open and didn't understand yet. But I poked somebody next to me, I'd find a kid who was in school. I'm like, "You speak English?" He's like, "Yeah." What's going on?
What's happening? Yeah. But I'm sure, did you feel it? I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. It's
there
was nowhere else I was going to be except sitting right there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, then the Lama said, "Anybody who's here today needs to come back tomorrow. And anybody who wasn't here today can't come tomorrow." So it's like, "Oh, thank you for inviting me." So he came back again, and then we went through the whole thing again. And at one point I said, "Well, what is he doing?" He was doing this big ceremony, and it was an empowerment, and it was from some special. He was a special person. He was, they call him a tertan, which means treasure finder.
Okay.
And so he had revealed these texts that were from 1,200 years ago, had been hidden 1,200 years ago. And he had been the one to find them and open them up so that we could practice them now. Because when they were hidden 1,200 years ago, the great Lama who hid them said, "There will be things in the future that you can't even imagine. There will be diseases that we don't have now. There'll be situations that we don't have now. And you'll need these fresh practices in order to cope with the things in the future.
So just so I'm clear,
Yeah.
for the first time in 12,000 years, you were...
No, 1,200.
I mean, 1,200,
Yeah.
yeah. Either way,
Yeah.
it's a long time.
Yeah.
In 1,200 years, you were there to bear witness to kind of the reopening of these...
He could have taught it before in Tibet, but it was
Okay.
it was the first time he taught it outside of Tibet.
Wow. I mean, that's huge.
It was like, it was crazy because I've read all these old books, the books about what happened 1,200 years ago, what happened, all these great meditation masters, and I knew the history pretty well on these things, but I thought it was almost like fairy tales, almost like fables,
Right.
And then suddenly I was there, and these things were happening before my eyes, and things went on, to happen that I really don't have much explanation for, beyond our ordinary experience. So it was like opening a door into a world that I didn't know still existed. And so, I mean, that's the crazy part about your question, it's like, well, what did you experience there? And how does that inform now? And that's why when I felt the push to come back to this country, I thought, if it works there, it's got to work here. If it doesn't work here, then I was making stuff up. So it's got to be like any kind of insight and clarity and understanding that we have should be universal. And so, okay, let's, let it rip, like come back and see. And I had huge culture shock when I came back.
Oh, I can only imagine going from a cave to where did you land first when you came back to the States?
Oh, I actually landed in Seattle at an old friend's place, luckily, because by that time I was actually really sick.
Oh, wow.
I had like all kinds of amoebas, and there's challenges as well to living in those kinds of environments. And it took me about a year to get better. And we ended up eventually in Phoenix.
Okay.
But all is well.
Well, and you brought up a really interesting point, because I feel like we don't necessarily have to have that sort of experience that catalyzes you or shifts you or moves you into expanding your awareness, like, wow, I thought this was a fairy tale, or this seemed too fantastical to actually be true, but then you lived it, you had this experience of it where I've had these similar, not that experience, but my own personal experiences where I'm like, wow, if that's possible, then what else is possible?
Right.
And then when you feel like, I remember as a little girl really enjoying the fairy tale. I think we all do to some extent, but also feeling like there was something not quite true about it at the same time.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling this sense of the type of love in a fairy tale wasn't real. Like I could feel it, but I had not experienced it to really connect to it. And then I was going through what I call disentanglement, what you all know is divorce, from my not anymore husband. And I went to a QHHT session that a girlfriend was doing, which is quantum healing hypnosis therapy. And it takes you to other lifetimes. And in the lifetimes that you go to are supportive for where you are in your life at the time. And I saw this love that I had. And I felt that, we've got some puppy love in the room now. If anyone hears a little noise, I was able to feel in the memory of this life that love. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it exists. And that was a catalyst for me to open myself up to love again after going through a really traumatic time. And then meeting that man from these lifetimes and connecting with him, and in such a way that, I feel like it's the universe in co-creation with you and how you set things up for yourself in your life. And, it wasn't an easy journey for us. And there were a lot of different aspects that made it a little more challenging for me, not so much for him. But all part of that bigger picture of what I came here to experience. And, like I said, very different from your story, but these things that you feel like that can't possibly be real. But when you live it and you experience it and then you see how that changes your life going forward, it's huge. It's huge. And that is available not just for Lisa and I, but for anybody who I think is just open and curious.
Right.
Yeah. So how did that ultimately then, you came back, you got yourself healthy again, and then where did Way of Chocolate come in
Oh,
at that
yeah.
point?
Yeah. And so that was I'm like, how do I give back? How do I share the things that I've been so lucky to experience in myself, and let people understand that this kind of magic from before is still available, is still happening, is still ever present. It's just, opening up a little bit to believe that could be true.
Yeah.
Or even just entertain the curiosity about it. Right? You don't have to believe anything. I mean,
Right.
I still say, like, one of the things that I did see while I was over there was that this Lama that was doing this big ceremony, he, at least in 2 times during his life, was able to take his foot and imprint it into solid rock.
Whoa.
And when I tell that story, I mean, even to this day, I don't know how he did it. I think it doesn't misalign with the things that we've been taught, right? When we're in school, they always teach us about molecules. They always say, oh yeah, there's the protons and neutrons, and then the electrons are flying around, but the thing is mostly space.
Yeah.
And so if all molecules are mostly space, why do we live like they're not?
That's another very good question. Yeah.
And I suppose there are some good reasons why we don't.
Some practical ones, but
at the same time, it's like that is still true. And that's one of the things, like, trying to navigate, like, it's not this or that, right? There's some other ground in between where both are true.
Yeah. This and that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's kind of where your awareness is at the time is what you experience, in addition to those moments where you're like, you had that mind-blowing, like, wow, like, is this really happening?
Right.
Do you feel like that's also kind of a this and that?
Right. It's like it doesn't have to be what you thought was possible and what you're experiencing. It's
right.
Like, and what happens if we drop the judgments? We drop the opinions. We drop the, I have to understand, clinging to it.
Yeah.
And
that's
just simply experience it.
Yeah. Let me take that one in for a moment. Because I'm an understanding girl. Let me understand this. And sometimes there isn't a mental understanding. It's just this inner understanding,
like
which doesn't have words.
Right.
Yes, like
right.
a knowing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean that you're absolutely on track. It's beyond words, and that's where I run into like what we talk about in everyday life, where we live most of our lives within this bandwidth of thought. This bandwidth of what is articulatable, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the whole picture, because there is this entire world beyond what can be labeled by thoughts and words.
Yeah.
The inexplicable, the beyond concept. And that's one of the things that I feel like I didn't understand until I left the West, was that, like, we have, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Right? Our Western civilization is built on this premise that we probably don't think about very often, but yet, that defines our world in a big way. But what if that weren't it? What if that were wrong?
Yeah.
I liken it to, like, if you get a new car and you turn on the car and the radio station's on and it's like, oh, cool, I'm enjoying the music, and nobody ever told you could change the station. Eventually you get tired of that radio station, right? And then what if you realize, whoa, there's lots of different favorites, I don't have to listen to this, one station all the time. And that's what it's like with the mind. We're not trained as children to understand that there's something other than logical thinking and then what we call dualistic reality, which is this perception of self and other. I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous at first. Well, of course there's self and other. I'm sitting here and I am self, I have me and then I have chocolate. And that's what we prove wrong every single meditation class, because you take that piece of chocolate and you put it in your mouth, and within a few minutes, it's unfindable. And within a few hours, it's probably distributed to every cell in your being. So at what point did it stop being chocolate and start being me? Or is it not one or the other?
Right.
Right? Like, if we can prove it wrong within a short period of time with only a piece of chocolate, then maybe our whole perception of how things exist is a little bit limited. Like, there's more to it. There's more opportunity there for us to expand into an awareness that can embrace things beyond our imagination.
That feels so exciting. And the what if, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I feel like that questioning, that curiosity is enough to really allow you an expansive awareness that can catapult you in a way to experiencing something that you maybe didn't conceptualize as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's more about the questions than it is about the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really need to know how he put his foot in the rock. You know, like what would that give me? It might give me some ego satisfaction.
Yeah.
Oh, I got that. I understand that. Yep, that makes sense to me now. I feel stable and you know.
Girl, you're
secure.
like literally saying all the things that I'm like, no, I really would love to know how that happened. Like that will make me feel better. Like I'll, or not better, but just like make me feel like, okay, got that. What's the next thing?
But what if we never got that? What if we were really comfortable in being open to all the possibilities?
Yeah.
And having the clarity, like it's not like, like being open to the possibilities doesn't mean that we're like being blown around by the wind.
Right.
There can still be clarity and discernment and wisdom.
Sure.
But that wisdom arises out of not knowing the answers already.
It seems to me, and you hear people talk about this all the time. I even hear myself say it, is really getting comfortable in that discomfort of the unknown.
Yeah.
And that opens you up to things that you would never have experienced had you been kind of like what you're saying about the radio station. Had you been like, okay, this is my comfy little box that I'm going to just stay in because I like it here. But you don't realize that like there's maybe a cave over there that you're really excited about and you didn't even know was available. Yeah. So yeah, it's really beautiful. So I want to bring it back to the chocolate, which is kind of like where we started. But as we're wrapping up here, what chocolate would you say has been, and this is probably a really hard question. It's like asking a mom which is her favorite child, but like which chocolate has been most supportive for you, or one that you would say if I had to choose one? I know it's a tough question because I can tell you which one for me.
Oh, really?
Hands down, it's the Vietnamese coffee one.
Oh.
That one, I love the flavor, first of all. And there's something about whenever I put one of them in my mouth, I feel this, it's grounding to me, yet expansive. And it's just the sensorial experience of it in conjunction with the energy of it that makes it my favorite.
Wow.
Truly, like just really amazing. And then ginger I'm a little sensitive to ginger, but I have almost all my girlfriends, whenever I give them any of the chocolates, I always give them 90% of the time the ginger one, because there's something about the little crystallized pieces. It's like a little surprise that you get and you don't necessarily expect it. So I do eat it, but I just I don't eat that one a lot, or meditate with that one a lot. And sometimes I just have it because I feel like I want a piece of chocolate and I don't even make it into anything. It's just, I'm just enjoying it.
Yeah.
So, all right, now.
I don't think I could answer that question.
Is there one that you tend to like maybe seasonally becomes a support for you? Like now we're recording this in the summer. So is there one that you feel like is that you maybe like lean towards in the summertime?
I think usually I do go all in on one. Okay. For a period of time.
Okay.
And then it must be giving me exactly what I need. And then suddenly it's like, over there. So it absolutely moves from place to place. Like right now, I think cardamom is just super satisfying. Yeah. It's smooth and it's like, wow. I mean, cardamom, there's no other, like when we were trying to write the copy for the package, it's like, there's no way to describe cardamom.
No, there isn't.
As you say, it's like a singular kind of flavor, And
I feel like that one, like for me, I'm not a big cardamom person. So that was me expanding myself a bit because for whatever reason, it was something that I don't remember. This was like way back, back when you had the little flowers. And for whatever reason, I had them and I'm like, well, I have them for a reason. So I'm going to just open myself up and see what happens. And it was one of those that I felt was intense for me because it was a flavor that I don't necessarily feel connected to. But I would always find some enjoyment somehow in it. And maybe that's a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Even if you don't, it's
not
not your
what you
fave.
Yeah. Well, that's another huge topic, because you look back over life and you think, wow, the things that I didn't choose are actually, at least in my life, are the things that provided the most growth,
Mm-hmm.
the most challenge.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Bring forth all kinds of qualities that you might not have developed otherwise.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's an interesting exploration too, like and dislike, and
Yeah, what you're drawn to, and what's the energy around that? What's the purpose of it? And maybe there's a resistance to something, and that might be actually really what you need in that moment. I always tell my clients, whenever we're working with anything, whether it's an energy or an emotion or whatever, and I'm doing cards or whatever modality we're doing at the time, I'm like, if you feel any resistance, that's information.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel excitement, that's information. You feel neutral, there's no charge there. It's almost like, it's not that it's not for you, but it's just not something you need right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel anything on either end of the spectrum, there's something to that.
Mm-hmm.
So the resistance isn't necessarily saying no.
Right.
The resistance is showing you there's something, some energetic, some pattern, some dynamic that's maybe something to get curious about. Yeah.
Curiosity, that's a great word.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites right now.
Yeah.
Curiosity. So, Way of Chocolate can be found on the Lotuswei website.
Mm-hmm.
And you ship all year round. So
We do.
that's a really big thing. I know a lot of people think, okay, Phoenix, it's hot. How are they going to get it to me? Or if you live in a hot place, doesn't matter. There's ice packs. And I know for sure, because Lisa sent me some chocolates. This was a couple of years ago now in the summer. And they made it to Florida, which is also hot, without a problem at all. So it's definitely doable. So as we're closing out here, Lisa, is there anything that you'd like to share? Or?
No, I'm just really always grateful for everyone out there who is, delving into things that expand awareness and trying new things.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, why not try chocolate? I mean, seriously, it's a no-brainer. So thank you, Lisa, for having this conversation and taking the time to be here and share with everyone. And thank you for joining us. Bye for now.